My name is Jason Mercer. I'm 42 years old, born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. For as long as I can remember, there were only three things that mattered in our family: loyalty, legacy, and the business. Our family ran a construction company, started by my grandfather, expanded by my father, and run for over a decade by me. We weren't rich, but we were respected, trusted. We built homes, schools, and hospitals. We built lives. I spent 18 years of my life waking up at 5:30 a.m., skipping vacations, skipping birthdays, all because I believed in one thing: this business would one day be mine and my brother's. Together. My younger brother Ryan? He was always the charmer. He could walk into a room, say a few smooth lines, and win people over. Clients loved him. Investors liked him. But when it came to the real work, the late nights, the site inspections, the insurance disputes, Ryan was nowhere to be found. And I didn't mind. I told myself, he's young. He'll learn. But after my father passed away, everything changed. In a matter of weeks, my access to internal systems was restricted. Staff who once reported to me started forwarding emails to Ryan. My office was moved from the executive floor to a shared cubicle in the back. At first, I thought it was temporary, just reorganization, until our lawyer called me and said, "Jason, your brother filed a restructuring form. According to this, you're no longer listed as a partner, just an employee." My hands literally froze. My father's legacy, my life's work, gone in a single signature. And guess whose name was on that signature line? Ryan Mercer, my own brother. I walked out of the building that day with a cardboard box in my arms and a fire in my chest. But I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. Because what Ryan didn't know is that I saw this coming. And what he really didn't know was that for the past 2 years, I had quietly been running a forensic audit behind the scenes. Every fake invoice, every off-the-books cash payment, every vendor that didn't exist, all of it documented and sitting in a locked drawer, just waiting for the right moment. That moment had just arrived. Growing up, I always looked up to my dad. He was the kind of man who didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened. He believed in hard work and keeping your word, and in treating every employee like family. He used to say, "A man's name should mean something, even when he's not in the room." And I took that to heart. When I was 13, I started spending my summers at the construction sites. At first, I was just hauling tools, sweeping debris, but slowly my dad taught me everything. Pouring concrete, framing, reading blueprints, managing crews. By the time I turned 20, I knew every corner of that business better than I knew my own apartment. Ryan was different. He didn't want to get his hands dirty. He preferred shaking hands in boardrooms over lifting beams in the heat. And while part of me resented it, I always gave him the benefit of the doubt. He was my little brother. I was supposed to protect him, not compete with him. After college, I passed on a high-paying project management job out of state, just to stay and help Dad expand our operations. Ryan, meanwhile, was hopping between startup ideas and half-finished ventures. But when Dad had a mild stroke in his late 60s, we both stepped up, in our own ways. I handled day-to-day operations. Ryan took care of PR and business development. To be fair, at the time, we made a good team. In those years, our company grew fast. We took on 3 new contracts, hired 20 more workers, and even opened a second office. I remember working late nights and eating cold takeout in the side trailer, covered in dust, while Ryan sat over a spreadsheet or two from his laptop at home. I told myself, that's just how we split the work. And then there were the good moments. Family BBQs, celebrating new contracts, watching my niece take her first steps in our parents' backyard. Ryan would raise a glass and toast our father's vision. He even gave me a plaque that said, "To the brother who builds dreams with calloused hands." I didn't see it then, but now I know it was all an act. I ignored the small signs, like when he pushed to move payroll to an outside consultant he trusted, or when vendors started calling me, asking why their checks were late, even though Ryan swore everything had been paid. Still, I kept working, kept building, kept trusting, because I believed blood was thicker than profit, because I thought what we had was real. But looking back, the red flags weren't just red. They were waving right in my face. I remember one day, a longtime supplier pulled me aside after a meeting and said, "Jason, no offense, but is everything okay between you and your brother? He acts like you don't exist in the boardroom." I laughed it off, brushed it away. Because when you built a life on trust, suspicion feels like betrayal, even when it's the truth. My father passed away 6 months later. A quiet, peaceful passing in his sleep. At the funeral, Ryan stood next to me, gave a beautiful eulogy, and held our mother's hand as she wept. That night, as we were cleaning up the house, he handed me a glass of whiskey and said, "Here's to legacy, Jay. It's ours now." And I believed him. I had no idea that while I was giving the eulogy, he was already preparing the paperwork to remove me from the company. I thought I had a brother. I thought I had a future. I thought I had built something that would last forever. But what I really had was a target on my back. The first shift was subtle. Too subtle to fight. It started with emails I was never copied on, updates about contracts I was supposed to be managing. I'd walk into meetings and find out decisions had already been made without me. The project timelines, budgets, even which foreman would lead a site, all of it was decided by Ryan, and I was informed as an afterthought. I tried brushing it off. Maybe he's just taking initiative. But initiative doesn't include changing the locks on the accounting office without telling your co-partner. One Monday morning, I walked into the building and scanned my badge, only to be told by a new receptionist that my access had been adjusted. Adjusted? As in, I couldn't access our own financial server room anymore. Then came the new org chart circulated by HR. It listed Ryan as managing director and me as project advisor. No mention of co-ownership. No equity titles. Nothing. When I confronted Ryan in his office, calmly, he smiled and said, "Don't take it personally, Jay. We just need a more dynamic image for investors. You're still important. You're just better in the field." I laughed, bitterly. But I didn't argue. Because arguing with a snake only gets you bitten. I went back to my site truck and just sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the dashboard. I felt like I was being erased. Not fired. Not demoted. Erased. I thought of my father. All those years he spent building the company, trusting that one day his sons would carry it forward together. And now, one of those sons was gutting it from the inside, and the other was being pushed out without a fight. But I wasn't going to make a scene. Not yet. Instead, I started watching. I began double-checking vendor logs, quietly cross-referencing invoices. And I noticed something odd. A series of payments labeled consulting fees, going out every other Friday. $6,000, $9,000, $000, $14,000. All to the same LLC. I Googled it. No website. No office. Just a P.O. box in another state. Then, at our quarterly review meeting, I saw a financial report that made my stomach turn. One of our largest contracts, a multi-million-dollar school renovation, had been reported as delayed due to unexpected costs. Except, I was on that project, and there were no unexpected costs. When I raised the question, Ryan shut it down. "It's just legal language for the stakeholders," he said. "Nothing to worry about." That night, I logged into the backup server at home, an old drive I'd maintained during my father's tenure, just as a precaution. And I started comparing numbers, line by line, month by month. Something was wrong, very wrong. But I kept silent, because at that point, I wasn't chasing justice, I was gathering ammunition. Then came the final straw. One Friday, I showed up to work and saw my name removed from the parking lot plaque. The one that read, "Reserved, J. Mercer, co-founder." Gone. And in its place, "Reserved, Ryan Mercer, CO." I stood there for 5 full minutes, holding my coffee, staring at that metal plate. People walked past me. A few gave me awkward smiles. No one said a word. That was the moment something inside me hardened. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, surgical, efficient. And I knew, if I stayed quiet a little longer, I could do the same thing, but better. So I smiled. I nodded. I even clapped for Ryan during the next staff meeting like everything was fine. Because while he was busy building an empire on lies, I was building a case strong enough to bury him. It happened on a Sunday. Funny how betrayal doesn't care about calendars. I was at home, cleaning out my inbox, not for work, but for peace of mind. I'd been archiving old contracts, cleaning folders, deleting spam, when I noticed something strange. A shared drive I hadn't touched in months suddenly had a new file in it. The folder was labeled Q3 Vendor Disputes. It shouldn't have even existed. We hadn't had vendor disputes. At least, not officially. Inside that folder was a PDF, scanned from someone's phone, grainy but readable. It was an invoice, billed to our company, for over $37,000. From a company I'd never heard of. I opened a second PDF. This time, it was a signed authorization form, approved by Ryan. Under the line where it said, "Reason for emergency payout," he had scribbled, "Client risk. Jason's delays on-site created exposure. Fast payout needed." I stared at the screen. Read it. Read it again. And just froze. Not only had he forged my name in the comments, he had blamed me. Blamed me for his theft. And that was it. No yelling. No throwing chairs. No cursing the universe. Just silence. I sat back in my chair, took a deep breath, and something inside me clicked. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was calculated character assassination. He wasn't just stealing money. He was rewriting my reputation. And if I didn't stop him soon, he'd make sure I had nothing left. That night, I didn't sleep. I made a pot of black coffee at 1:30 a.m. and sat down at the kitchen table with a notebook. I wrote one word at the top of the page: war. And below it, I drew 3 bullet points: forensic accountant, SEC whistleblower path, civil lawsuit prep. I wasn't angry. I was focused. Because unlike Ryan, I don't make decisions in rage. I make them in strategy. I reached out to a former Army buddy, now a cybersecurity consultant. I asked him to trace the flow of payments from our corporate accounts to any shell companies. He said, "You finally going after him?" I answered, "No, I'm going through him." That night marked the last day I ever trusted my brother. It was also the first night I started planning how to crush him completely and leave no trace of myself in the rubble. The next morning, I went back to the office like nothing had happened. Same pressed shirt, same neutral smile, same thermos of black coffee. To Ryan and the staff, I looked like a man who had accepted his fate. What they didn't know was that I had already begun writing their obituary. Step 1. Documentation. I spent the next 2 weeks quietly pulling internal reports from the backup server I had maintained since our father's time. Most employees didn't even know it existed. Ryan certainly didn't. Purchase orders, wire transfer logs, scan checks, every contract signed, every vendor added. I wasn't downloading them. I was printing them on a secured home printer in my garage at 1 a.m. each night while the rest of the world slept. By the end of the month, I had 4 thick binders filled with timelines, figures, and false vendors, each organized with color-coded tabs. Step 2. Reinforcements. I reached out to a forensic accountant named Monica, who specialized in corporate fraud and whistleblower cases. We met in a diner, and I handed her the first binder across the table. She flipped through it silently for 10 minutes, then looked up and said, "You're sitting on a landmine. The IRS is gonna love this." We signed an NDA, and she started tracing the movement of company funds into private shell accounts, some registered under aliases Ryan had created years ago. Turns out he had been siphoning company money for over 3 years and using it to invest in crypto and luxury properties through third-party proxies. Step 3. Legal leverage. I contacted an attorney who had handled shareholder disputes for a Fortune 500 case back in the day. He reviewed my documentation and immediately said, "Do not confront him. Let him keep digging. And when we hit all at once." He helped me draft a detailed legal complaint citing breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, tax fraud, and conspiracy to defraud a corporate partner. We also filed a tip with the SEC and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, anonymously at first. Meanwhile, Ryan? He was glowing, posting selfies in Miami with real estate brokers, uploading LinkedIn posts about vision and leadership. I even overheard him telling an employee, "Jason's just tired. He doesn't have the drive anymore. I'm doing him a favor." He truly believed he had one. Step 4. The insurance policy. I knew once this thing detonated, it could get ugly. So I pre-recorded a video, a full 45-minute walkthrough of everything I had discovered, with files shown on screen, dates, emails, even his voice on recorded calls. I sent copies to 2 trusted people, 1 lawyer, 1 journalist, with instructions. If anything happens to me, or this case mysteriously disappears, release the video. By the 3rd month of preparation, the noose was tightening. Ryan just didn't know it was around his neck. Then came the day that told me it was time. I received an alert from Monica. She had traced a $120,000 payment from our company account straight into a property escrow account registered in Ryan's wife's maiden name. The property? A penthouse loft, the same one he had just bragged about during our staff Zoom call. That was it. The smoking gun. Unmistakable. Untraceable, unless you were already watching. I sent a final email to my lawyer. The subject line said, "Ready." We set the court date, filed the motions, and I scheduled a quiet meeting with the board, just 2 days before Ryan's big presentation to investors. He had no clue. He was about to walk into that room thinking he owned the future. What he didn't realize was that I had already set it on fire, and all that was left was to lock the doors. The morning of Ryan's big investor presentation, the office buzzed like a beehive. Fresh coffee, catered breakfast, suits walking in and out with rehearsed smiles. Ryan had rented out a downtown conference space. Full audiovisual setup. Projectors, branded folders, the whole deal. He walked in like a rock star, pressed navy suit, gold cufflinks, hair slicked back. Smiling, confident, arrogant. He didn't know that just 3 hours earlier, a federal court clerk had stamped his name on a civil complaint for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. He didn't know that the IRS had issued a preliminary freeze on 4 of his bank accounts that morning. And he sure as hell didn't know that 2 plainclothes agents were sitting in the back of the conference room, waiting. I arrived late on purpose. I walked in as Ryan was introducing himself to investors. At Mercer Contracting, we don't just build structures, we build trust. The irony nearly choked me. I walked up to the front row and sat down, eyes locked on his. He flinched, just for a second, then forced a smile and said, "Glad you could join us, Jason." I replied, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." 10 minutes in, he started pitching numbers, projections, efficiencies he created, all built on stolen money and forged reports. That's when my lawyer walked in. Calm, quiet. He handed a sealed envelope to the event manager and nodded. The manager walked up to the podium, tapped Ryan on the shoulder, and whispered something. Ryan looked confused, then annoyed. He stepped aside to read the envelope. His face went white. He looked up at me, eyes darting, searching for control, but there was none left. The investors watched in stunned silence. One of them, an older gentleman from Chicago, asked, "Mr. Mercer, is this true?" Ryan tried to respond, stuttering, sweating, but my lawyer stepped forward and said, "If you'd all like to see the numbers yourselves, we've prepared an updated set of ledgers, all verified by an independent forensic team." He opened a folder, placed it on the table. That was the moment it all shattered. Phones started ringing. One investor stood up and walked out. Another cursed under his breath. "Ryan?" He froze, hands trembling, face strained. Then the 2 agents stood up. Quietly, calmly, they approached him and said, "Ryan Mercer, you're being detained for questioning related to a federal fraud investigation." I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just watched. Watched as he was escorted out of the very room he had filled with his lies. Watched as every face that once praised him turned cold. Watched as the brother who tried to erase me got erased in front of everyone. The following week, my attorney made a public statement clarifying the situation. I didn't attend the press event. I didn't need to. The documents spoke louder than I ever could. Ryan was indicted on 4 counts of fraud and tax evasion. The company board voted unanimously to remove him from all executive duties. He lost his house, his cars, and his so-called legacy. Me? I declined the offer to return as CEO. I didn't want to rebuild what he broke. I wanted to build something that could never be stolen from me again. It's been 2 years since the fall. Sometimes I still drive by the old Mercer Contracting office, the building my father poured his soul into. It's got a new name now. New management. New people. And that's okay. Because legacy isn't about buildings. It's about boundaries. About integrity. about knowing when to let go. After everything happened, I took some time off. Sold the last of my shares, bought a small house just outside Asheville, North Carolina. Nothing fancy, just quiet. For the first 6 months, I barely left my porch. I sat with my thoughts, my regrets, and a notebook I filled with hard truths. I kept asking myself, how did I not see it coming? Why didn't I fight earlier? But those questions stopped mattering the day I realized this wasn't my failure. This was his. My mistake wasn't trusting him. My mistake was thinking loyalty means silence. Now, I run a small consulting firm, just me, a laptop, and a few clients. I help family-run businesses set up guardrails, compliance systems, transparency audits, fraud detection tools. In other words, I help people protect themselves from the exact kind of betrayal that almost broke me. I don't do it for money. I do it because I've lived it. Because I know how it feels to be stabbed in the back by someone who once shared your last name. As for Ryan, he took a plea deal. He's serving 4.5 years in federal prison. He still sends letters sometimes. Apologies. Excuses. Promises to change. I haven't written back. Not because I'm angry. Because I'm free. And I've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say to a betrayer is nothing at all. I lost a company. I lost time. I lost blood. But I gained something I never expected. Clarity. The kind that comes when everything fake burns away, and all that's left is what's real. Now I live simple. I wake up with peace. I cook my own breakfast. I walk in the woods. I listen to my own thoughts without fear. And I carry one final lesson with me, always, the one I hope anyone watching this will remember. He took everything, my title, my reputation, my legacy. But he couldn't take my soul. And from that, I rebuilt my life. Not for revenge. Not for redemption. But for me.